That cold morning, no one expected an act of kindness to change everything. What started as another day on the road became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we show that behind the engines and the leather, there are still human hearts. The rain had been falling steady for hours, turning the cracked asphalt of Highway 17 into a slick mirror that reflected the gray sky above. It was the kind of downpour that seeped into your bones, making the world feel smaller, heavier. Jack Harlan gripped the handlebars of his old Harley, the engine's low rumble the only sound cutting through the patter on his helmet. He was riding with the Iron Wolves, a tight-knit crew of riders who'd patched together a life on the fringes of small-town America. Not the kind of men who chased headlines or glory, just guys who'd seen too much of the world's rough edges and chosen the open road over surrender. Jack was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered with a salt-and-pepper beard that hid the faint scar running along his jaw from a long-ago wreck. His leather vest, worn thin at the elbows, bore the Iron Wolves emblem, a snarling wolf against a rusted chain. He'd been with the club for 20 years, ever since the military spit him out in pieces after a tour in the desert. The Brotherhood wasn't about rebellion. It was about holding on when everything else let go. That morning, they were headed to a roadside diner just outside Milford, a dot on the map where truckers and wanderers swapped stories over black coffee. The rain made the ride tense, visibility low, but Jack rode steady, his mind drifting to the empty house waiting for him back in Reno. Up ahead, the taillights of a sleek black SUV flickered erratically, weaving across the lane like a drunk stumbling home. Jack eased off the throttle, signaling to the two riders behind him, Tommy, the young hothead with a fresh tattoo on his neck, and Big Mike, the quiet giant who'd lost a leg in Nam but never missed a run. The SUV swerved again, tires hissing on the wet road, then slammed into the guardrail with a metallic screech that echoed like a scream. Metal twisted, glass shattered in a cascade of shards, and the vehicle flipped once, twice, before coming to rest on its side, smoke curling from the crumpled hood. Jack's heart kicked hard in his chest. He killed the engine and was off his bike before the kickstand hit the ground, boots splashing through puddles as he ran toward the wreck. The smell hit him first, burnt rubber mixed with gasoline, sharp and acrid, clinging to the damp air. "Call 911. He bellowed over his shoulder to Tommy, who was already fumbling for his phone. The door on the driver's side was jammed, bent inward like a crushed can. Inside, a woman was slumped against the steering wheel, her dark hair matted with blood, suit jacket torn at the sleeve. She was young, maybe early 30s, with the polished look of someone who belonged in boardrooms, not on this forgotten stretch of highway. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths, a thin trickle of red staining her collar. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Jack's voice came out rough, steadying himself as he peered through the shattered window. No response, just the faint gurgle of rain dripping inside the cab. He glanced back at the road. No other cars in sight, the storm keeping everyone indoors. Big Mike lumbered up, his prosthetic leg thudding against the pavement, and together they yanked at the door. It gave with a groan, hinges protesting, and Jack reached in, careful not to jostle her neck. Her pulse was there, faint under his calloused fingers, but the dashboard had pinned her leg at an unnatural angle. Signs of struggle marked the interior. Her purse spilled open, papers fluttering in the wind, a half-eaten protein bar crushed on the seat. Whatever had caused the crash, it wasn't just the rain. Tommy jogged back, rain streaming down his face. "Ambulance is 20 minutes out. Bridge washed out on the county road." Jack nodded, his jaw tightening. 20 minutes was too long. He unbuckled her seatbelt with deliberate care, supporting her head as Big Mike cleared the debris. "Easy now," Jack murmured, more to himself than her, lifting her free inch by inch. Her eyelids fluttered, a soft moan escaping her lips. but she didn't wake. Cradling her against his chest, he carried her to the shoulder, laying her on his jacket to shield her from the mud. The iron wolves formed a loose circle, their bikes a barrier against the wind, watching the horizon for help that might not come in time. In the distance, sirens wailed faintly, but Jack's focus stayed on her face, pale, smudged with dirt, yet there was a quiet determination in the set of her jaw, even unconscious. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers holding the line, in the weary stares of folk scraping by in dusty towns. Who was she? A traveler caught in the storm, or someone running from something bigger? The questions hung in the air like the exhaust from their idling bikes, unanswered as the rain kept falling. By the time the ambulance arrived, lights cutting through the gray like knives, the woman, Elena Vasquez, her ID would later reveal, was stabilized just enough. Paramedics swarmed, barking orders, and Jack stepped back, wiping blood from his hands onto his jeans. The cops pulled up next, notebooks out, eyes narrowing at the sight of the 3 leather-clad riders standing like sentinels. "You see what happened?" one officer asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Jack met his gaze evenly. "She lost control. We got her out." No more, no less. The Brotherhood didn't explain itself to badges. Actions spoke louder than alibis. As they loaded her into the rig, Elena's hand twitched, fingers brushing Jack's arm in a fleeting grasp. He froze, a pang twisting in his gut, remnant of old losses, ghosts he'd buried under miles of blacktop. The doors slammed shut, and the ambulance sped off, leaving the iron wolves in the downpour. Tommy clapped Jack on the shoulder. "You did good, brother." But Jack just stared after the fading lights, the weight of the morning settling like lead. Little did he know, this wreck was just the spark. What followed would test loyalties, unearth buried pains, and force a choice between the road's code and a world that saw monsters where men stood ready to help. The diner waited, coffee growing cold, but the day had shifted. In Milford, whispers would start soon enough. About the bikers who pulled a stranger from the jaws of death, no questions asked. Yet the real story, the one that bound heart to heart, was only beginning to unfold. The hospital in Milford was a squat brick building on the edge of town, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped insects against the relentless rain. Jack Harlan pushed through the emergency room doors, the scent of antiseptic hitting him like a wall, clean and sharp, a stark contrast to the mud and blood still caked on his boots. His leather vest dripped steadily onto the linoleum, drawing sidelong glances from the nurses at the desk. Tommy and Big Mike had peeled off back to the diner to grab dry clothes and a pot of coffee, but Jack couldn't shake the pull. He'd given his statement to the cops outside the wreck, kept it brief. The swerve, the crash, the pull from the twisted metal. No embellishments. Now, the waiting room chairs creaked under him as he sat, elbows on knees, staring at the scuffed floor. The Brotherhood didn't chase gratitude, but something in her fleeting touch lingered. A ghost of connection in the storm. Hours blurred into the hum of the place. Beeps from monitors down the hall, the murmur of voices behind curtains, the occasional wail of a siren pulling in fresh chaos. Jack's mind wandered to the empty miles ahead, the kind of road that swallowed regrets whole. He'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years back, the kind that ate slow and silent, leaving him with a daughter he barely knew anymore, off in college chasing a life he couldn't touch. The iron wolves filled the gaps. Rides at dawn, bonfires under starless skies, the unspoken pact that no brother rode alone. But today, the code felt tested, stretched thin by a stranger's shallow breaths. A doctor emerged finally, clipboard in hand, his white coat rumpled from the shift. "You're the one who pulled her out?" he asked, eyeing Jack's blood-streaked hands. Jack nodded, rising slowly. Elena Vasquez, 32, executive from the city. Concussion, broken leg, some lacerations. She's stable, thanks to you getting her free quick. Docs in San Fran airlifted her for surgery if needed, but she's asking for the bikers who helped. He paused, a flicker of curiosity in his tired eyes. Not many folks would stop in that mess. Jack shrugged, the motion pulling at the ache in his shoulder from the lift. Wouldn't leave her. The doctor led him down a corridor lined with beeping machines, past rooms where shadows of pain played out in low light. Elena's was at the end, door ajar, the rain now a soft patter against the window. She lay propped on pillows, her face pale under the bandage at her temple, leg elevated in a cast that gleamed white against the sheets. Monitors whispered her vitals. Steady now, and her dark eyes opened as Jack stepped in, sharp and assessing despite the fog of painkillers. "You," she said, voice hoarse but firm, like someone used to commanding rooms. "The one with the beard." Jack hovered by the door, hands in his pockets, feeling out of place amid the sterile calm. Up close, she carried the polish of success. Gold watch on her wrist, even in the gown, a laptop bag by the bed like an extension of herself. But there was a crack in it, a vulnerability in the way her fingers twisted the sheet. "They told me what you did. Risked your neck pulling me out. I don't remember much. Just the rain, the wheel slipping." Jack nodded, gaze dropping to the floor. "Road's tricky when it's wet. You okay?" Simple words, but they carried the weight of miles ridden in worse. She studied him, the silence stretching, broken only by the drip of an IV. "My name's Elena, CEO of Vasquez Tech. I was heading to a meeting in Portland. Big merger. Lost control after dodging some idiot trucker." Her voice faltered, eyes distant, as if piecing together fragments. Jack caught the hesitation, the unspoken edge. Signs of struggle in the car, the erratic swerve. It smelled like more than rain to him, but he didn't press. The Brotherhood knew when to let silence do the talking. She shifted, wincing, and reached for a water cup on the side table. Jack moved without thinking, stepping forward to hand it to her, steadying her hand as she drank. Her fingers were cool, manicured nails chipped from the crash, and for a moment, their eyes met, his weathered blue, hers a deep brown holding storms of their own. "Thank you," she whispered, setting it down. "Really, I owe you my life." The words hung there, heavy with implication, but Jack just pulled back, shaking his head slightly. Gratitude was a road that led nowhere good. He'd learned that watching brothers burn out chasing it. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. The parking lot, a sheen of puddles reflecting the sodium lights. Tommy pulled up on his bike, engine growling low, with Big Mike in the sidecar they'd rigged years back. Jack lingered a minute longer, watching Elena's chest rise and fall, even. "Rest up," he said quietly, turning for the door. She called after him, voice gaining strength. "Wait, your name? The club?" He paused, hand on the frame. "Jack. Iron Wolves. No more." As he walked out, the cool air hit him, washing away the hospital's cling, but her gaze stuck, a quiet hook in the quiet. Back at the diner that evening, the neon sign flickered open against the twilight, casting red glows on the gravel lot where their bikes stood in a row, engines cooling with soft ticks. The place was a relic, Formica counters scarred from decades, jukebox humming old country tunes, the smell of grease and pie mingling with fresh coffee. Millie, the waitress who'd been pouring for truckers since the 80s, slid mugs across without a word, her eyes kind but knowing. She knew the wolves. They'd chased off rowdy drunks more than once, left 20s for the single mom behind the grill without fanfare. Tommy leaned on the counter, nursing his brew. "She's something, huh? City girl in a suit. Bet she thinks we're all thugs." Big Mike grunted from the booth, prosthetic legs stretched out. "Doesn't matter what she thinks. We did right. Jack stared out the window at the darkening road, the day's weight settling. But beneath it, a flicker. Elena's hand in his, the unspoken plea in her eyes. The town whispered already. He'd overheard the cops on the radio, painting the wolves as convenient heroes or suspects in waiting. Misjudged. Always. Yet in the Brotherhood's code, it was simple. Protect what can't protect itself. As night deepened, the diner's lights blurred into the mist, and Jack felt the pull of the road again, but this time, it carried her shadow. A thread weaving into the fabric of loyalties he'd long thought unbreakable. Little did he know, the crash had cracked open doors to pasts neither could ignore, forcing choices that blurred the line between stranger and kin. The rain stopped, leaving the air heavy with promise and the faint scent of wet earth, as the wolves rode out into the velvet dark, engines fading like echoes of mercy. The days following the crash blurred into a rhythm of routine for the Iron Wolves, the kind that kept ghosts at bay. Morning rides through mist-shrouded valleys. Afternoons wrenching engines in the club's makeshift garage on the outskirts of Milford. Evenings around a fire pit where stories swapped like shared cigarettes. Jack threw himself into it, his hands black with grease as he rebuilt a carburetor on his Harley, the metallic tang mixing with the faint ozone of lingering rain. But Elena's face haunted the edges of his focus, her cool fingers in his. The way her eyes had searched his like he held answers to questions she couldn't voice. The Brotherhood sensed it. Tommy ribbed him lightly over burgers at the diner. "You gone soft on city suits now, old man?" Big Mike just watched, his silence a steady anchor. Milford wasn't the sort of town that forgave outliers easily. Whispers spread like oil slicks on the diner counter. Folks eyeing the wolves' bikes parked outside, muttering about those roughnecks who probably caused the wreck themselves. The local paper ran a blurb. Biker group aids crash victim. Coincidence or convenient? No byline praising the pull from the mangled SUV, just skepticism laced with old prejudices. Jack caught the bartender at the Roadhouse shaking his head one night, voice low to a cluster of farmers. Heard they run with the wrong crowd. Girl like that, fancy car. Bet she was running from something they knew about. It stung. Not for the words, but for the truth they half glimpsed. The world saw leather and chains, not the scars beneath. Elena healed faster than the doctors predicted, her executive drive pushing through the pain like a deadline. A week after the crash, she was out of the hospital, leg in a boot, crutches clicking against the polished floors of the Milford Inn where she'd holed up to recover. Her company sent a car, sleek, anonymous, but she waved it off, insisting on handling things herself. The merger in Portland could wait. Loose ends here gnawed at her. That morning, sunlight slanted through the motel curtains, casting long shadows on the generic landscape painting above the bed. She sat at the small desk, laptop open, fingers hovering over keys. But her mind replayed the skid, the jolt, the bearded stranger's steady grip. Not just the rain, no. She'd glimpsed the black sedan in her rear view, tailing too close before accelerating, forcing her swerve. Corporate espionage? A rival's dirty play? Vasquez Tech was in the crosshairs of a hostile takeover, and she'd been the linchpin. But admitting that meant dragging innocence into her storm. She dialed the number from the police report, heart thudding against her ribs. Jack Harlan, this is Elena Vasquez. From the highway. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, the CEO mask slipping back into place. On the other end, Jack paused mid-wrench in the garage, oil rag in hand, the phone's buzz cutting through the clang of tools. Tommy raised an eyebrow from across the workbench, but Jack waved him off, stepping into the sunlight filtering through the open bay doors. "Yeah," he said simply, wiping his brow. The air smelled of hot metal and pine from the nearby woods. "How's the leg?" "Better. Listen, I want to thank you properly. Meet me? The diner on 17, the one you mentioned." There was a pause, her breath audible, laced with something unspoken. Jack glanced at the wolf's emblem on his vest, the wolf's eyes fierce yet loyal. Gratitude was a trap he'd sidestepped before, but her tone pulled like a current. "All right, hour from now." He hung up, the receiver heavy in his calloused palm, and felt the shift, a thread tightening between their worlds. The diner hummed with midday quiet when Jack arrived, boots thudding on the wooden steps, the bell jingling like a hesitant welcome. Millie nodded from behind the counter, pouring his usual black without asking, her eyes flicking toward the corner booth where Elena waited. She looked sharper today, tailored blouse over the boot, hair pulled back, but shadows lingered under her eyes, the kind born of sleepless nights piecing puzzles. Jack slid into the seat opposite, the vinyl creaking under his weight, the scent of frying onions drifting from the kitchen. "You shouldn't be on that leg yet," he said, more observation than concern, though his gaze softened at her wince as she adjusted. She met his eyes, direct, no games. "I heal quick, and I don't like debts." From her purse she slid an envelope across the table, thick, crisp, sealed with a gold clasp. 50,000, for you or your club. Whatever you need, repairs, a new ride, something for the road. The words hung, practical as a contract, but her hand trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability beneath. Jack stared at the envelope, its weight unspoken, then pushed it back gently, his fingers brushing hers in the motion, a echo of the hospital room. "I don't want your money," he said quietly, voice low like gravel under tires. The diner noise faded, Millie's clatter in the background a distant hum. Elena's brow furrowed, confusion flickering. "Why? You risked everything. I saw the report. The SUV was totaled. Your bike's got scratches from the slide." She leaned forward, crutches propped nearby, her scent, clean soap and faint jasmine, cutting through the grease. Jack's jaw tightened, memories surfacing. The desert heat, a buddy's hand slipping from his in the chaos, the helplessness that followed. "We don't do it for payout. Iron wolves. We stop because it's right. Leaving you there? That'd stick worse than any scar." His eyes held hers, steady, the silence between them thick with the road's unspoken code. She searched his face, the CEO armor cracking, revealing the woman who'd clawed her way from nothing. A first-gen immigrant kid turned tech mogul, always fighting alone. "People like you, they expect something. Everyone does." But Jack just shook his head, the envelope untouched. Outside, a truck rumbled past, kicking up dust that danced in the sunlight. In that moment, the misjudgments of the town felt distant. Here was a bridge, fragile, built on refusal rather than reward. As they talked, halting at first, then deeper, Elena let slip fragments, the tailing car, the merger threats, the isolation of her high-rise life. Jack listened, his presence a quiet bulwark, not pushing, just there. The Brotherhood's loyalty stirred in him, a moral compass pointing toward protection, even for this polished stranger. But tension simmered beneath. If her pursuers circled back, the wolves might find themselves in the crossfire, tested beyond a single rescue. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage and loyalty can travel. The afternoon sun hung low over Milford, casting elongated shadows across the diner's parking lot, where Jack's Harley sat like a faithful sentinel, chrome glinting dully against the gravel. He and Elena lingered in the booth long after the envelope lay forgotten between them, the air thick with the aroma of cooling coffee and the faint sizzle from the grill. Her crutches leaned against the seat, a stark reminder of the fragility she'd hidden so well, and Jack found himself tracing the lines of exhaustion on her face. Not pity, but a quiet recognition of battles fought in silence. The Iron Wolves' code had always been about the road ahead, not the debts behind. But this woman stirred something dormant, a pull toward the unknown that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Elena sipped her water, the ice clinking softly, her eyes flicking to the window where a pickup truck idled too long, its driver obscured by tinted glass. "It's not just the merger," she said finally, voice dropping to a murmur that barely carried over the jukebox's low croon of an old Johnny Cash tune. "There's someone gunning for me, not metaphorically. That sedan on the highway. It wasn't random. I've been getting threats, emails, calls from blocked numbers. Vasquez techs onto something big, AI security software that could lock out corporate spies for good. But it paints a target on my back." She paused, fingers tightening around the glass, the tremor returning as if the words unlocked a door she'd bolted shut. Jack watched her, the way her shoulders hunched slightly, betraying the CEO's armor. In his mind, it echoed the desert nights, whispers of incoming fire that no briefing could prepare you for. He leaned back, the vinyl sighing under his weight, and rubbed a hand over his beard, feeling the rough stubble like an old map of regrets. "You tell the cops?" It wasn't judgment, just the practical edge honed from years of seeing justice bend for the wrong reasons. She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. They'd file it under high-profile paranoia. "My board thinks it's bluff, cutthroat business, nothing personal, but I felt it that morning, the car closing in, forcing the skid. If you hadn't stopped." Her voice trailed, eyes meeting his with a rawness that cut deeper than any scar. Jack's chest tightened, a flicker of the old isolation cracking. He'd ridden alone too long, burying his daughter's distant calls and his wife's fading laugh under engine roar. But here, across a scarred diner table, protection felt like a vow he hadn't meant to make. Outside, the truck peeled away with a gravel spray, but Jack's gaze sharpened, instincts from patrols kicking in. "You got proof? Anything solid?" Elena nodded, pulling her phone from her purse, the screen lighting her face in a pale glow. She scrolled to a grainy photo, a dark sedan captured in her dash cam, moments before the crash, license plate blurred but distinctive. Then an email screenshot. "Back off the deal, or the road ends for you." No sender, just a shadow of intent. Jack studied it, the diner fading around them, Millie's footsteps a distant rhythm. "This ain't over," he said quietly, handing the phone back. His mind raced to the wolves. Tommy's quick fists, Big Mike's unyielding calm. They weren't vigilantes, but leaving her exposed when against the grain, the same grain that had him pulling her from the wreck. She pocketed the device, exhaling slowly, the tension in her frame easing just a fraction. "I don't expect you to play bodyguard. That's why the money. It was supposed to square us, let you walk." But Jack's refusal hung between them like unspoken loyalty, and in that space, a bridge formed. He thought of his daughter, Sarah, her last voicemail laced with hesitation. "Dad, I miss the rides, but things are different now." Isolation had been his shield, but compassion crept in, warming the edges. "Walk. Roads don't work that way. You need eyes on this. The wolves got 'em." It wasn't a promise, not yet, but the words carried weight, pulling him from the fringes toward something shared. As the sun dipped lower, painting the lot in amber, Elena gathered her crutches, wincing as she stood. Jack rose too, offering an arm without fanfare, his touch steady against her elbow. They stepped out into the cooling air, the scent of damp earth rising from recent puddles, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the crunch of gravel underfoot. Tommy and Big Mike pulled in then, bikes rumbling like thunder on the horizon, sensing the shift without a word. Tommy cut the engine first, helmet off, his young face curious. "Everything good, boss?" Jack nodded toward Elena, introducing her with a simple tilt of his head. "This is Elena. She's got trouble tailing her. Might need the pack." Big Mike dismounted slowly, his prosthetic thudding softly, eyes assessing her with the quiet judgment of a man who'd seen too many storms. No questions, just a nod that sealed it, the brotherhood expanding, if only for a ride. Elena blinked, surprise softening her features as the wolves formed a loose circle, their presence a bulwark against the encroaching dusk. Whispers from town would twist this too, painting them as opportunists circling a wounded executive. But in the fading light, it was clear. Loyalty wasn't about leather or engines. It was the silent stand when the world turned blind. They rode out together, Elena in the club's spare van that Big Mike drove, her silhouette framed against the window as the Harleys flanked it like guardians. The highway stretched ahead, asphalt still scarred from the crash, a reminder of how close the edge had come. Jack led the pack, wind whipping his vest, heart pounding with a mix of resolve and unease. The threats loomed larger now, retaliation a shadow on the rear view, but in protecting her, he glimpsed redemption. Not for the wolf's image, but for the man who'd lost his way in the miles. Tension coiled tighter, confrontations brewing on the horizon, yet beneath it, compassion bloomed, a quiet force binding outcasts in the face of the gathering dark. The night air carried a chill that seeped through the leather of Jack's vest as the Iron Wolves convoy rolled into Milford's outskirts, the van's headlights cutting a pale path through the gathering dusk. Engines hummed in low harmony, a rhythmic growl that masked the undercurrent of tension coiling in Jack's gut. Elena sat rigid in the passenger seat beside Big Mike, her crutches stowed in the back, fingers drumming a silent beat on her knee. The highway behind them stretched empty, but Jack's mirrors told a different story. Headlights flickering too far back, then vanishing into the curves, like a predator testing the wind. He'd signaled the pack to tighten formation, Tommy riding point on the flank, his bike weaving subtle checks for tails. No words passed over the comms. The Brotherhood moved as one, instincts sharpened by years of watching backs on forgotten roads. They pulled into the club's compound, a weathered barn converted into a garage on a forgotten acre, ringed by chain link and floodlights that buzzed to life with a flick of Big Mike's hand. The place smelled of oil and aged wood, tools scattered like relics from battles long past. Jack killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the van door's creak as Elena stepped out, boots scraping gravel. She paused, eyes scanning the shadows, the faint glow from the fire pit casting flickering patterns on her face. "This is your headquarters?" she asked, voice steady, but laced with the uncertainty of a woman stepping into uncharted territory. Jack nodded, gesturing her toward the main room, a space cluttered with maps pinned to walls and a long table scarred from countless meetings. Home base, safe. Inside, the air warmed with the scent of simmering stew from a pot on the stove. Big Mike's doing, his way of grounding chaos. Tommy slumped into a chair, wiping sweat from his brow, while a couple other wolves filtered in from the perimeter check. Lena, the sharp-eyed mechanic with grease-streaked arms, and Rico, the wiry vet whose quiet laugh hid a limp from shrapnel. They nodded to Elena without fanfare, no stares or judgments, just the easy acceptance of folks who'd patched up strangers under moonlight. Jack poured her a mug of coffee, black and steaming, the steam curling like unspoken worries. "Tell us the rest," he said, settling across from her, the wooden chair groaning under his frame. His hand rested on the table, calluses etched like road maps, a subtle anchor in the dim light. Elena exhaled, the weight of the day pressing her shoulders down. She set the mug aside, pulling out her phone again, the screen's glow illuminating the faint bruise blooming along her jaw from the crash. It started 3 months ago. Anonymous tips to my board. Leaks about the AI project. Sabotage attempts on prototypes. I thought it was internal. Someone on payroll turning. But the sedan, that was personal. She scrolled to more screenshots. Distorted voice messages. A grainy video of her car in a parking garage, tires slashed under cover of night. Her voice cracked on the last one, a voicemail heavy with menace. "The road's long, Vasquez. One wrong turn and it's over." Jack listened, the room still save for the distant tick of a cooling engine outside. Rage simmered in his chest, contained like embers under ash, not the hot flash of youth, but a steady burn forged from losses that taught him fury. Without focus was just noise. Tommy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You got names? Faces?" Elena shook her head, frustration etching lines around her mouth. "Not solid, but my rival, Harlan Crow, big tech shark out of Seattle. He's been circling the merger, whispering to investors. If he gets the software, it's game over for Vasquez Tech." The irony of the name hung unspoken. Harlan, like Jack's own, a coincidence that twisted like a knife. Jack's mind flashed to his own Harlan roots, the family farm sold off after his wife's illness drained them dry, leaving him adrift until the wolves pulled him in. Protection wasn't about glory. It was this, the quiet circle of faces around the table, ready to stand when the world scattered. Big Mike stirred the pot, the spoon clanging softly, breaking the tension. "We watch. No heroics yet." His voice rumbled like distant thunder, prosthetic leg shifting with a faint click. Elena glanced at him, then around the room, the flicker of surprise in her eyes softening to something like gratitude. These weren't the thugs the papers painted. They were a family, woven from shared silences and small acts. Lena handing her a blanket without a word. Rico sliding over a plate of stew, steam rising in comforting wisps. For the first time since the boardroom betrayals, Elena felt the isolation crack, her polished world colliding with this raw, unyielding loyalty. Jack caught her gaze, a long stare passing between them, heavy with the moral weight of what came next. Helping her meant risking the wolves' fragile peace, drawing shadows to their door. But walking away, that would hollow him out, echoing the regrets of roads not taken with his daughter. As midnight crept in, the fire pit outside crackled to life, flames dancing shadows across the compound. They planned in low voices, rotating watches, Tommy scouting the motels for suspicious plates, Lena rigging a spare bike with reinforced tires for Elena's eventual escape. Jack stepped out for air, the cool night wrapping around him like an old coat, stars pricking the velvet sky. Elena followed on her crutches, the thump of them uneven against the dirt. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, stopping beside him, the fire's warmth licking at their faces. "I can call security, hire pros." Jack turned, the light carving deep lines in his beard, his blue eyes reflecting the flames. "Pros chase checks. We chase what's right." His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough to bridge the gap. A trembling pause, her breath catching, his steadying the air between. In the distance, an engine revved faintly, then faded. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the first whisper of retaliation. Jack's jaw set, compassion warring with the instinct to shield his pack. But the choice anchored him. Protect the vulnerable, even if it meant facing the storm head-on. Elena's hand finally brushed his, a fleeting warmth that stirred buried hopes, the silent justice of the brotherhood unfolding in the quiet night. Tension mounted, the horizon heavy with unseen threats, yet in that shared silence, redemption whispered. Outcasts finding strength not in isolation, but in the unbreaking chain of loyalty. The fire popped, embers rising like prayers into the dark, as the wolves prepared for the shadows closing in. The first light of dawn crept over the compound like a hesitant intruder, painting the barn's rusted roof in muted golds and grays. Jack hadn't slept much, his cot in the back room a tangle of sheets, the distant hum of crickets giving way to the low murmur of engines stirring awake. The fire pit's embers had died to ash overnight, leaving a faint smoky scent that clung to his clothes as he stepped outside, boots crunching on dew-kissed gravel. Elena was already up, perched on a weathered bench by the garage door, her crutches propped nearby, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. She nursed a mug of coffee, steam rising in lazy curls, her face etched with the quiet strain of a night spent listening to every shadow. "Morning," Jack said, voice rough from disuse, as he crouched to stoke the remnants of the fire. The wood crackled softly, flames licking back to life, casting flickering warmth across her features. She nodded, eyes tracing the horizon where the highway snaked into the mist. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that voicemail, the way the voice distorted, like it was hiding more than just a threat. Her fingers tightened around the mug, knuckles whitening, a small tremor betraying the calm she projected. Jack straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans, the gesture deliberate, grounding. He'd felt that same vigil in the desert, nights wired on adrenaline, waiting for the crack of gunfire that never announced itself. Wolves have your back. Tommy's out scouting the roads now. If they're circling, we'll spot 'em first. The compound buzzed to life around them. Big Mike limping from the kitchen with a tray of eggs and toast, the sizzle of bacon cutting through the chill air. Lena tinkering with the van's undercarriage, her wrench clanging rhythmically against metal. Rico paced the perimeter, radio clipped to his belt, his limp more pronounced in the cool morning. Elena watched them move, a quiet awe softening her gaze, as if seeing the Brotherhood's rhythm for the first time. Not chaos, but a deliberate harmony born of necessity. You all. You do this for anyone? Or just strays like me? Her question hung light, almost teasing, but Jack caught the undercurrent. The loneliness of a life built on deals and deadlines, where loyalty was bought, not earned. He sat beside her on the bench, the wood creaking under his weight, close enough to feel the faint warmth radiating from her. Started with brothers. Vets like me, folks the world chewed up and spit out. Now, it's whoever needs the road cleared. His words carried the weight of memory, eyes distant, fixed on the rising sun fracturing the mist. Elena tilted her head, studying the scar along his jaw, the faint lines of grief that creased his brow. Veteran, right? The way you move, calculated, like you're always scanning. Jack nodded, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. Gulf War. Lost too many to count. Came home to a wife fighting her own war. Cancer took her slow. Left me with a daughter, Sarah, who's distant now. College kid, building walls I can't climb. The admission slipped out unbidden, raw in the morning quiet, his hand flexing as if grasping at faded photographs. Elena's breath caught, a soft intake that mirrored his own vulnerability. She set the mug down, turning toward him, her dark eyes holding a mirror to his pain. Sarah. I had a father like that. Mechanic in a nowhere town, rode a beat-up bike on weekends. He taught me to fix engines before I could read contracts. Died in a factory accident when I was 16. Pushing for better safety, wouldn't back down from the bosses. Her voice wavered, fingers brushing the edge of the blanket. A gesture small yet laden with the echo of loss. Jack's gaze sharpened, the coincidence landing like a punch, two outcasts shaped by absence, drawn to the roar of engines and the open road as solace. He'd have liked you, she added softly, standing firm when it counts. Before he could respond, Tommy's bike roared into the lot, gravel spraying as he skidded to a halt, helmet yanked off, face flushed. Got eyes on a sedan, black, like the one from your pick, tailing the highway turnoff, circling back toward town. Plates fake, but I clocked it twice. The words ignited the air, the compound snapping to alert. Big Mike dropped the tray with a clatter, plates scattering, while Lena grabbed a shotgun from the wall rack, her movements fluid, unhurried. Rico keyed the radio, voice low and steady. Perimeter tight. No entry without signal. Jack rose, hand instinctively going to Elena's arm, steadying her as she gripped her crutches. Stay inside. We've handled worse than shadows. She nodded, but her eyes blazed with defiance, the CEO surfacing amid the fear. Not hiding. If it's Crow, I end this. Jack met her stare, the moral pull twisting inside him. Protect her, yes, but at what cost to the pack? Contained rage simmered in his chest, not explosive, but a quiet forge, tempered by years of choosing compassion over vengeance. He guided her to the barn's side door, the scent of oil and earth enveloping them, while the wolves fanned out. Tommy and Rico on bikes, flanking the access road, Big Mike and Lena holding the line at the gate. The sedan appeared minutes later, creeping from the tree line like a predator emerging from cover, its engine a low purr that set Jack's teeth on edge. It paused at the chain link, headlights piercing the dawn, then accelerated, tires churning dirt as it rammed the gate with a metallic screech. Sparks flew, the impact shuddering through the ground, but the reinforced bars held, bending but unyielding. Shouts erupted, muffled voices from the car, two figures spilling out, faces obscured by ski masks, one wielding a tire iron that glinted in the light. "Vasquez, call off your dogs!" the leader barked, voice distorted but laced with urgency, swinging at the fence. Jack burst from cover, the wolves converging like a closing net. No guns drawn. The code forbade first blood, but fists ready, stances low. Tommy tackled the iron wielder from the flank, a grunt and thud echoing as they hit the dirt, rolling in a tangle of limbs and gravel. Big Mike charged the driver, his massive frame absorbing a wild swing, prosthetic leg planting firm as he pinned the man against the hood with a forearm like iron. Lena circled, wrench in hand, her shout sharp, "Back off, or we make this permanent." Inside, Elena watched through a crack in the door, heart pounding, her father's lessons flooding back, the fight for what's yours, no retreat. Jack faced the leader, the man's breath ragged, tire iron raised but trembling. "Tell Crow the deal's poison. She walks, or we all burn." The words spilled in a rush, fear cracking the bravado. Jack stepped closer, voice a low rumble cutting through the chaos. "You picked the wrong road. Turn back, now." No rage, just the unshakable calm of a man who'd stared down worse, his presence a wall of quiet justice. The leader hesitated, eyes darting to his fallen partner, then dropped the weapon, hands up. They scrambled back to the sedan, engine coughing to life, peeling away in a spray of dust that hung like a fading threat. The compound fell silent save for heavy breaths and the distant whine of retreating tires. Tommy hauled up, lip split but grinning fiercely. Big Mike released the driver with a shove, watching the car vanish. Jack turned to Elena, emerging pale but steady, crutches thudding. Their eyes met, the revelation settling between them. Not just shared losses, but a deeper tie. Her father's unyielding stand mirroring his own, pulling him from isolation into this fragile kinship. Compassion swelled, a balm against the adrenaline crash, as he helped her to the bench, his hand lingering on her shoulder. The wolves regrouped, nods passing like silent vows. The Brotherhood's loyalty, a shield against the gathering storm. But the retaliation had only begun, risks mounting, forcing Jack toward a redemption forged in protection, not solitude, the quiet strength of hearts beating in unison against the dark. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach more people who still believe in humanity. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist that clung to the compound like a reluctant shroud, but the air remained thick with the acrid tang of scorched rubber from the sedan's hasty retreat. Jack stood by the bent gate, his boots planted firm in the gravel, watching the dust settle in lazy swirls that mirrored the churn in his chest. The wolves moved with purposeful quiet, Tommy pressing a rag to his split lip, the faint metallic scent of blood mixing with the earth. Big Mike riding the chain link with a grunt, his prosthetic leg grinding softly against the post. Lena scanning the horizon through narrowed eyes, wrench still gripped like a talisman. No cheers, no boasts, just the steady rhythm of patching what broke. A brotherhood's unspoken language forged in moments like this. Elena leaned against the barn wall, crutches hooked over her arm, her breath coming in shallow pulls that she tried to steady. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving her pale, the bruise on her jaw a darkening shadow under the climbing light. Jack turned to her, crossing the yard in 3 strides, the crunch of his steps the only sound breaking the hush. He stopped close enough to catch the faint jasmine of her skin beneath the sweat and fear, his hand hovering before settling lightly on her elbow. A anchor, not a claim. "You all right?" The words were low, roughened by the morning's edge, but laced with a gentleness he'd reserved for his daughter in quieter days. Her eyes met his, dark pools reflecting the flicker of flames from the rekindled fire pit, and for a beat, the world narrowed to that gaze, heavy with the weight of what they'd just weathered together. She nodded, but her free hand trembled as she brushed a strand of hair from her face, fingers lingering at her temple where the crash's echo still pulsed. "I've faced boardrooms that felt like war zones, but this, it's different. Real." Her voice cracked on the last word, vulnerability seeping through the CEO's polish, and Jack felt it echo his own fractures. The desert nights where control slipped like sand, leaving only the hollow ache of survival. He guided her back to the bench, the wood warm now from the sun, and sat beside her, the space between them shrinking as the compound's bustle resumed around them. Rico dragged a broom across the scattered debris, the rhythmic swish a soothing counterpoint, while Big Mike called out adjustments to the gate, his rumble steadying the air. Inside the barn, away from the light, Elena finally let the story spill fully, her words tumbling like rain on tin as Jack listened from the workbench, tools idle in his lap. The fire's glow filtered through the open door, casting elongated shadows that danced across her face. "My father, Raoul, he wasn't just a mechanic. He rode with a crew like yours back in the day, small outfit in the valleys near Bakersfield. They called themselves the Desert Phantoms. Nothing fancy, just men who fixed what the world broke. He taught me everything. How to spot a tail on the road, change a tire under pressure, stand when they tell you to fold." She paused, eyes distant, fingers tracing the edge of her boot cast as if feeling for old scars. "That accident that took him? Factory owners cutting corners on safety gear. He spoke up, organized the workers. Next shift. A beam slipped. No proof, just whispers, and a closed case. I built Vasquez Tech to fight that kind of silence, lock out the cheats with code instead of fists." Jack's breath caught, the parallel landing like a slow-rolling thunder. Raoul, a name that tugged at buried threads. He'd known a rider by that name once, decades back, during a cross-country run after his discharge, sharing a campfire under desert stars. Stories of a daughter with fire in her eyes, a kid who could rebuild an engine blindfolded. The coincidence sharpened into revelation, his hand tightening on the wrench until the metal bit into his palm. "Raoul Vasquez? From the old Phantom Patch?" Elena's head snapped up, surprise widening her eyes, the air between them charging like the moment before a storm breaks. "You knew him?" Jack nodded slowly, the memory surfacing raw. Raoul's laugh, gravelly and warm, handing him a beer after pulling his bike from a ditch. "Rode with him once, 92. He mentioned a girl, smart as hell, fixing cars while he fixed the world. Never put it together. Until now." The weight of it settled, redefining the pull he'd felt since the wreck. Not chance, but a thread from his past weaving into hers. Raoul's legacy binding them in this fragile stand. Jack's isolation cracked wider, compassion flooding the gaps where grief had hardened. He'd mourned his own losses alone, riding out the pain in endless miles. But here was redemption's quiet call. Protecting Elena wasn't just code. It was honoring a brother's echo, mending what time had frayed. Her hand found his across the bench, fingers intertwining with a tentative squeeze, the touch electric in its simplicity, a trembling bridge over shared silences. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden, held back by sheer will. But Jack saw them, the small quiver of her lip, and squeezed back, his thumb brushing her knuckles in silent vow. Outside, the wolves gathered instinctively, sensing the shift without words. Tommy wiped the blood from his chin, glancing their way with a nod of approval. Big Mike paused his work, a rare smile creasing his face as he lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward like a signal flare. Lena joined them, sliding a fresh pot of coffee onto a crate, the steam carrying notes of chicory and comfort. "We hold the line," she said simply, pouring for Elena first, her grease-streaked hand steady. The group formed a loose circle, voices low as they mapped the next moves, scouts on the highways, calls to old contacts for intel on Crow's shadows. No grand plans, just the moral suspense of waiting, the emotional undercurrent of loyalty binding them tighter. But tension coiled anew as midday shadows lengthened, a distant engine growl echoing from the tree line. Another probe, or the storm's full fury? Jack's gaze hardened, contained rage simmering beneath the calm, his arm around Elena's shoulders now, protective, unyielding. The revelation had awakened something deeper. Not just brotherhood, but a personal redemption, forgiving the miles that separated him from his daughter by standing for this woman who carried his old friend's fire. Whispers from town would twist this too, bikers entangled with a CEO, opportunists or worse. But in the compound's heart, truth burned clearer. Strength lay in compassion's quiet stand, justice in the faces turned toward the threat. The engine faded, but the air hummed with promise. The road ahead demanding one final choice: retaliate or redeem, fight or forgive, as the sun beat down, illuminating the fragile humanity beneath the leather and resolve. The afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, stretching shadows across the compound like fingers reaching for secrets long buried. Jack felt the weight of Elena's hand in his, a fragile anchor amid the gravel's quiet crunch and the faint sizzle of Lena's welding torch mending the gate. The air hung heavy with the scent of hot metal and cooling earth. The distant highway a low hum that promised both escape and pursuit. Her revelation about Raoul had cracked something open in him, a door to memories he'd sealed with miles of blacktop, the kind that left a man hollow. Now, as the wolves circled closer, their faces etched with the day's toll, Jack saw not just a brotherhood, but a mirror to the family he'd lost. Steady hands, unspoken bonds, the kind Raoul had embodied around those desert campfires. Elena pulled her hand away gently, but her eyes held his, dark and searching, the faint tremor in her lip betraying the storm beneath her calm. "If you knew him, why didn't you say something sooner?" Her voice was soft, threaded with the ache of years spent piecing together a father's ghost from faded photos and half-told stories. Jack rubbed his beard, the rough scrape grounding him, as he glanced toward the fire pit where embers still glowed faintly, casting warm flickers on the scarred table nearby. "Rhodes Branch, Elena. After that run with Raoul, life pulled me east. Military. Then the diagnosis for my wife. Letters got lost, numbers changed. But he talked about you like you were the spark that kept his engine running. Said you'd change the world. One fix at a time." The words hung between them, a bridge over the chasm of isolation Jack had ridden alone for so long. Tommy paused his cleaning of a chain, wiping sweat from his brow, his young eyes softening with rare understanding. Big Mike nodded from the gate, his massive frame silhouetted against the fading light, prosthetic leg planted like an unmovable root. No judgments passed. The wolves knew the pull of buried pasts, the way grief wrapped around you tighter than leather. Elena's breath hitched, a single tear tracing her cheek, caught in the sun's dying rays like a diamond on asphalt. She reached for her crutches, but Jack steadied her, his touch lingering. A quiet act of kindness that shifted the air, awakening the moral code etched into his bones. Protect what echoes home. As dusk settled, painting the sky in bruised purples, the radio crackled to life in Rico's hand, his voice low and urgent over the static. Sedan's back, 2 vehicles now, circling the East Ridge. Looks organized, not amateurs. The compound tensed, the hum of engines idling in the distance like a gathering storm. Jack's jaw set, contained rage flickering in his chest, not wild but forged, a veteran's fire banked for the right moment. Elena gripped his arm, her nails digging in slightly. The small gesture speaking volumes, fear laced with resolve, the daughter of a phantom refusing to fade into shadows. "Crow's men," she whispered, piecing it from the threat's pattern. "He won't stop until the merger folds." Jack signaled the pack with a sharp nod, the Brotherhood moving like a well-oiled machine. Lena dousing the fire, Tommy and Rico mounting bikes with throttles low to mask their approach, Big Mike barricading the secondary gate with crates that thudded heavily. No panic, just the silent judgment of men who'd faced worse than corporate wolves. Insurgents in sand-swept alleys, the world's blind eye to the broken. Jack helped Elena into the barn's back room, the air inside cooler, scented with aged timber and faint oil, monitors from Lena's rigged setup flickering with feeds from hidden cams. "Stay low," he murmured, his hand brushing her shoulder, the contact electric, stirring a warmth he'd thought lost to the road. For the first time since Sarah's calls grew sparse, compassion felt like redemption. Not a distant horizon, but a choice here, now, in the dim glow of screens showing headlights creeping closer. The confrontation unfolded in muffled bursts outside, engines revving sharply, the crunch of tires on dirt, low shouts swallowed by the encroaching night. Jack watched from the window slit, heart pounding steady, as the wolves held the line, Tommy's bike blocking a flank, a barrier of chrome and will. Big Mike's silhouette looming, absorbing a rush without yielding. Signs of struggle echoed faintly. Grunts, the thud of bodies meeting ground, the skid of boots on gravel. But no chaos, just contained force. The Brotherhood's loyalty, a shield that bent but never broke. Elena pressed beside him, her breath warm on his neck, fingers finding his again in the shadows. "Like my father," she said, voice trembling yet fierce. He'd stand just like this. One vehicle peeled away first, taillights vanishing into the dark like fleeing ghosts, followed by the second after a tense standoff, its driver gesturing surrender before accelerating into retreat. The compound exhaled as the wolves regrouped, faces smudged with dirt, breaths ragged but unbroken. Tommy clapped Rico on the back, a grin splitting his bruised lip. Lena checked the cams, her nod confirming the all clear. Jack stepped out, pulling Elena with him into the cooling air, the stars emerging overhead like silent witnesses. The revelation deepened in that quiet aftermath. Not just Raoul's echo, but Jack's own buried truth. He'd ridden with her father during a run that saved his life once, pulling Raoul from a rollover wreck much like this one. The cycle closed, humanity revealed behind the stereotypes. The thug biker a guardian, the polished CEO a fighter forged in the same fire. As the fire pit reignited, casting a communal glow, the group gathered, passing a jug of water that splashed softly in tin cups. Elena leaned on Jack, her weight a trust he'd earned through miles unspoken, her cast leg a reminder of fragility's strength. Whispers from Milford would twist this night into tales of biker vigilantism. But here, in the circle's warmth, justice bloomed beyond badges. Loyalty as family, compassion as the true ride. Jack's isolation dissolved fully, redemption settling like dawn's first light. He'd call Sarah tomorrow, bridge the gaps with words he'd hoarded too long. Elena's hand squeezed his, a long stare passing, tears held back but shining, the sound of held breaths mingling with the crackle of flames. In the epilogue's hush, as engines cooled and stars wheeled above, Jack murmured to the night, "Strength ain't in the roar. It's in the stand, the forgive, the quiet hold when the road tries to break you." The compound slept under that truth, a testament to hearts that beat beyond the margins, where outcasts found their way home. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of I Don't Want Your Money. See you in the next one.